In the winter of 1847, as the last snow of November blanketed the hills of Westbury, a woman died quietly in her sleep. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore, the last surviving member of the once feared Whitmore estate. Her death marked the end of an era, but it was only the beginning of a mystery that still rattles the local records office to this very day. Before we unravel the secrets hidden behind her locked mansion doors, don't forget to subscribe to Silent Heirs, where forgotten legacies, eerie inheritances, and haunting truths from history come back to life. Let me take you back to the night the wind wouldn't stop howling, and the servants whispered prayers, afraid that death had taken something it shouldn't have. Eleanor had no children. Her husband, Charles, died during a hunting trip 2 decades prior. His body never recovered. She never remarried. She lived in isolation in her 3-story stone mansion perched on Blackridge Hill. The townspeople referred to it as the Widow's Keep. Her staff consisted of only 2 people in her final years, a maid named Greta and a groundskeeper, Samuel Corrin, both of whom were forbidden from entering the East Wing. The East Wing had been locked since 1832, the year Charles vanished. When Eleanor passed, the town solicitor, Mr. Addington, was summoned. It was assumed her estate would be simple. She had no heirs.
No siblings. No obvious descendants.
But when Addington opened her will, he found something else. Rustle of parchment. A pen scratching against paper. The will was meticulous. Cold. It listed her possessions with chilling specificity. 19 rings, each with a different stone. 7 necklaces, all stored in a locked velvet chest. A ledger sealed in wax with a note, to be opened only in the presence of 2 witnesses and a priest. And the most curious of all, the East Wing is not to be entered unless all keys are found. If a single door remains unopened, no inheritance shall be claimed. The house does not forget. No one had seen Eleanor wear jewelry in 30 years. Some believed she'd sold it all. Yet here she was, listing each piece as if it had a role in something larger. Addington, spooked but intrigued, decided to follow her instructions. He brought in 2 witnesses, Greta and Samuel, and summoned Father Alcott, an aging but trusted priest from the village parish. When they opened the ledger, the room fell silent. Inside were names, hundreds of them. Names no one recognized, many marked with crosses, others with strange symbols next to them. Circles, arrows, numbers. But one page stood out. It was blank, except for one sentence, written in blood-colored ink. "One of you is not who you claim to be." The priest turned pale. Addington asked if this was a confession list or a ledger of debt. But no one had answers. Only more questions. That's when they began searching for the keys. The mansion had over 40 rooms. Most doors had long since rusted open. But the East Wing, every single room in it was locked with ornate ironwork. The keys were nowhere to be found. Except, in a place no one wanted to look, Eleanor's room. Greta remembered Eleanor mumbling in her sleep during her final days. The rings, she whispered. Each for a door or a sin. They returned to Eleanor's bedroom. The walls were lined with black lace.
No mirrors.
Just a dresser, a fireplace, and a portrait of Charles, her missing husband. The chest at the foot of her bed was locked. But in her vanity drawer, Addington found an old note. "They'll only fit in the right hands. The doors know the difference." They pried the chest open, and inside, cushioned in velvet, sat the 19 rings and 7 necklaces, just as she'd written. Each one seemed crafted from materials long out of use. Bloodstone, serpentinite, jet. One ring had an engraving of an eye, another a screaming face, and beneath them, a small iron key with a symbol carved into its head. A symbol matching the first door in the East Wing. They opened that door the next morning. What they found was not a room. It was an archive. Lined from floor to ceiling were shelves of leather-bound books, scrolls, and letters. But every single one had a red seal with the same insignia, a snake devouring its tail. And written across the back wall, in paint that had aged into a dark crimson, was a phrase in Latin, mortis non tacet. The dead do not stay silent. They didn't understand what they were looking at. Some books listed names. Others detailed events that hadn't yet happened, or couldn't have possibly been witnessed by anyone still living. One document described the death of a man in 1851, 4 years in the future. Another, titled Inheritance of Sins, had 7 names: Addingtons, Gretas, Samuels, and 4 they didn't recognize. They'd only opened one room. There were 6 more locked doors in the east wing, and each seemed to demand a different ring. That night, Greta vanished. No one heard her leave. No carriage tracks.
No sightings.
The next morning, a ring was missing from the chest, and the second door was open. Inside was only a chair and a mirror, but when Samuel looked into it, he saw someone standing behind him. Addington swore there was no one there. He was wrong. She may have died in peace, but what she left behind wasn't meant to be found. The rings weren't just jewelry. The necklaces weren't just heirlooms. And the doors weren't meant to be opened. Not by the living. By the time the third door was opened, there were only 2 left to witness it. Samuel had stopped speaking. Greta was gone. And Addington, the man who once scoffed at superstition, now held each ring like it could bite. They found the third key beneath a loose stone in the fireplace. It was tied with a strand of red hair. The ring needed to unlock that door was the smallest of all, silver with an obsidian gem that shimmered like oil. Samuel said it was colder than ice when he touched it. But they turned the key anyway. And this time, the room wasn't a room at all. It was a theater. A miniature stage was set, with velvet curtains and wooden seats, no more than 20 feet wide. A music box began to play the moment the door creaked open. On the stage were 2 marionettes, one in a black suit, the other in a blood-red dress. They danced slowly, their strings vanishing into the ceiling, where there was no light, only shadow. Then, a single voice spoke from the stage. She waited, and waited, and waited. But you opened the door. And now she walks again. Samuel collapsed. His nose began to bleed. Addington pulled him from the room. They locked the door again. But the music kept playing. Even after the key was removed. Even after they buried it. In the town below, strange things began happening. The priest, Father Alcott, was found wandering barefoot at the edge of the marshes, muttering Eleanor's name and bleeding from his palms. The librarian reported that several books had disappeared, ones that hadn't been touched in decades. When they checked the archives, 7 pages were missing from the town's death register. And 3 days later, someone rang the bell at the church tower. But the tower had been sealed since 1803. No one was inside, except a single ring, placed carefully on the altar, the one that had vanished with Greta. It was the ring of the eye. Addington, shaken, wanted to burn the rings. He gathered them in the fireplace, doused them in oil and lit the flame. But instead of melting, they pulsed. Every gem flashed once, like blinking eyes, and the fire turned blue. The books in the east wing rustled as though a breeze had passed through the sealed rooms. Samuel screamed from his bed, clawing at his neck. He claimed someone was whispering through the walls. And that night, the 4th door opened on its own. The 4th room contained only names, painted on the walls. Hundreds of them. Some were smudged, others written over. But 7 were glowing faintly, including Samuel's. Addington begged him not to enter. Samuel did anyway. He approached his name, trembling, then turned to say something. But before he could speak, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Addington dragged him out, but Samuel never woke again. He didn't die. Not quite. His body remained. But his mind was gone. Only 3 doors remained now. Addington tried to leave the estate, but every time he crossed the gates, he found himself back at the front steps. The world beyond seemed to loop, folding in on itself like a drawing on paper, no matter which road he took. He was trapped. The house would not let him leave. On the 6th day, the 5th key appeared, placed on his pillow. Alongside a note in Eleanor's handwriting, it was never about inheritance. It was about continuation. He opened the fifth door, and inside was Charles Whitmore's body, preserved, upright, his skin like porcelain, his eyes open. He was wearing the sixth ring. Charles hadn't gone missing. He had been here all along, sacrificed, entombed, preserved by something unholy? Addington didn't know. But on the wall behind him were portraits. Not painted, not photographed, pressed into the wall, as if the stone had remembered them. One of them looked like Samuel, another like Greta, and one was Addington himself, but older, scarred, eyes missing. Addington stumbled backward. The room began to shrink, the shadows moving inwards like walls closing. He fled. And that's when the sixth door opened. The sixth room was empty, except for a mirror. The same mirror from the second room. But this time it didn't reflect Addington's image. Instead, it showed Eleanor, standing behind him, still, eyes wide. She whispered, "Only the last door is locked. Only the last death is real." And then the mirror cracked. Addington fell unconscious. When he woke, all the doors were closed again. The keys were gone. Samuel's body had vanished. And the rings were back in the chest, every one of them, including the one that had disappeared. But now, they were arranged in the shape of the Whitmore crest. And a new item had appeared beneath the velvet. A document, stamped by the Royal Tax Office, dated 1847. Reclamation of estate assets. Property of the deceased Eleanor Whitmore. Addington turned pale. At the bottom was his signature. He had no memory of signing it. The document listed all assets. 19 rings, 7 necklaces, 1 estate, 6 reconciled debts, and 1 final item, 1 living custodian, bound by record, to remain until the next dies. Addington dropped the paper. The front door locked behind him. And the 7th ring glowed red. It was time to open the final door. You see, Eleanor never wanted peace. She wanted order, to document death, to preserve what should have been forgotten. Each ring was not an heirloom. It was a chain, and now Addington wears them all. He is the new record keeper, the custodian of the dead. His name now carved in the 7th room, where no one leaves, where no one dies. They simply remain, forever. If you ever receive an old key, or inherit a locked house from someone you never knew, check the mirrors. And whatever you do, don't open the last door. Subscribe to Silent Heirs. Some stories aren't told, they're inherited.